Ole Anderson. I always like to know when someone's worked for Ole Anderson, especially back in the Georgia days, how was he as a boss?
Oh, you know what was funny, James, and I want people that hear this to realize there was no internet. I know they hear that a lot. There was no cell phones. So for someone like me, the only way to get booked or to get in anywhere is every now and then the wrestling magazines, the after magazines, they would put an address in the back of it to a wrestling promotion. So all us young guys did is we mailed out 8x10s. You would just go get some old black 8x10, black and white, and you would just mail them to anywhere that would listen. And I tried everything to get into wrestling. I called Georgia Championship Wrestling one time, James, and Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer answered. And you know what he said? He said, if you come to Atlanta, I'll kill you. Okay, wrong number. I don't think I'm going to Atlanta. And I tried, and I didn't get no response. James, I laugh when these young wrestlers now say that a promoter owes them something, or I wish somebody would return my call. That's bull. Nobody owes you nothing in this business. I mailed out, I bet, hundreds of 8x10s, never got a response. And listen to this, James, I hear about Mike Jackson. Never met him, from Alabama. I hear that Mike Jackson is always taking guys to TV. And I done tried everything. I've been hung up on, I've been told no, whatever. So I get a hold of Mike Jackson. And James, I'm thinking that we're going to have this big meeting and, you know, get to know each other. But he says, be at Atlanta TV Saturday morning. I said, well, now hold on here. You mean like the Superstation, Tommy Rich and Buzzsaw? He said, yes, Saturday morning, be there. Oh, okay. But then he told me this, something that I will defend to the day I die. He says, you're going to get paid, but I'm going to take a booking fee, James. I said, I don't care if you take every bit of it. I didn't care. I'm going to go be on TV. Now, again, I was 18, 19 years old. I walk in Techwood Drive, TBS. And all you got to remember, James, all these wrestlers, all I've ever seen is in the magazines. Jerry Lawler and them. There was no cable. There was, Turner's broadcasting was just taking off. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in a dressing room with Jerry Lawler, Rip Oliver from Portland, all these guys that they're sitting right beside me. Are you kidding me? This is like the greatest. You take all of my money. And what's funny, I was only paid $40, James, for TV. I gave Mike Jackson half of it. I didn't care. I'd have gave him all of it. There was no other way to get on TV for me. And then I just kept my mouth shut. And then that's the first time I met the whole Armstrong family, if you can believe it. Tugboat was there as, it wasn't even called Tugboat. They had just brought him in. He wasn't even Big Steel Man then. He was, I don't even remember what they called him, but
he's
that
Fred
was his
Ottman.
first.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember Rick Rude had just started and he was there. I'm sitting in the dressing room and, but I'll tell you a quick story, James. Ole was in charge of everything. And I knew right off the bat. And I remember he had a meeting one time and he had a sheet of paper. He said, if your name is on this list, he said, you're staying. If I don't call your name, you're out of here. That cutthroat. Well, my name wasn't on like either list. And I thought I was important. Okay. So I go up to Ole and said, well, my name, I mean, what am I supposed to do? And Ole looked right at me, James, a straight face. And he says, well, you're not even important enough to put on the sheet of paper. And I said, okay. So I just went back and sat in my corner. But I noticed every week the top guys that came in, I got to work with. I had mentioned to you earlier, one of my first angles, Rip Rogers was one of and I love him to death. He was one of the top heels feuding with Tommy Rich. And James, he would beat you in the ring and then spray paint your hair. Now, boy, times have changed, ain't it, in pro wrestling. But I remember, and then Tommy Rich saved me. Man, for just an old country boy like me, you know what? I didn't wash that pink out of my hair for 2 weeks. James, I walked around and walked in the stores with a pink. I wasn't washing that out. Are you kidding me? Hey, Rip Rogers did this to me. So I was so proud of that. And so, you know, and then show you how amazing it was. One day, this is how quick things change in our business. I'd worked for Ole. You know what was cool, James? We would tape early in the morning, and then I would rush home to Charlotte and watch it at 6:05. Now, that's pretty cool right there. What was so amazing is one day, without any warning, Ole walks in, doors are swinging like an old John Wayne movie, and he says, I want to introduce to you the new owner of Georgia Championship Wrestling. And all of a sudden, Jim Crockett walks in, and you could have heard a pin drop. Ox Baker was over here. What was funny is Mike Davis and Tommy Lane had just left Crockett to try to get a push. And all of a sudden, Jim Crockett walks in. And I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I wasn't important, but I knew something special was fixing. I mean, things are fixing to change. And it's just as I'm talking to you, Jim Crockett introduced himself. He said, I want to introduce to you the new booker. And he stepped out of the way, and here comes the American Dream. Wow. And that was the first time I ever seen the American Dream. And I remember Chick Donovan, who I love to this day. He walks over. Dusty called out a list. Something about that list, James, I'm telling you. And Dusty called the list out, said, this is who I want. The rest of you, pack your bags. And James, you talking about a cold-hearted business. I just looked and watched guys like Ox Baker just start packing their bags. They were fired. There was no warning. But I remember Chick Donovan walked over to Dusty, and he said, Dusty, you never called out my name. And Dusty said, I've already got my nature boy. Man, meaning Ric Flair. So Chick Donovan left. A lot of the guys went on and made, good careers out of themselves. But that was the transition. And then later, JJ found out, who was Dusty's right-hand man. He said, it says here on your address that you live in Charlotte. And I said, yes, sir. He says, well, I will start giving you some work in Charlotte, North Carolina. So, man, I was in heaven, Jay. I was working 7 days a week. And then Mike Jackson, he knew I was such a good hand. He said, how would you like to go to Bill Watts? They need guys. Let's go. James, for years, in 1 week, you can go back and look, I was doing 8 TVs a week. I would go to WWF. I went down to Florida. I walked in Championship Wrestling from Florida, and the first thing Dutch Mantell, our buddy, said, sure, Sal, I think I got an 8x10 at home of you. So at least Dutch got them, So, I hear stories about all the guys hating each other, and Crockett hated McMahon, but buddy, I loved everybody. I went to Bill Watts, and me and Rocky King wrestled Kamala, not in a tag, at the same time. And I remember when Bill Watts told us that, I guess I had a puzzled look on my face. And I remember Bill Watts stood up, just a bear of a man, and he said, kid, you don't get paid by the hour. And I always remembered that. But man, quick story about Mid-South. I remember Butch Reed showed up late at TV, maybe 4 minutes. As soon as he walked in, Bill Watts said, that's $500 fine. And he said, yes, sir. So you hear all the stories about Bill Watts or whatever, but you're talking about a man that he was in charge. And then later, what was funny is I got to work with him in WCW when they brought him in. And I loved him. Eric Watts, his son, was such a great guy that I got to work with in the beginning. But just one thing led to another. It sounds like, make believe, but that's what happened.